It's one of those random mystery questions you often see thrown about when talking about Oblivion. Yesteryear you might have seen it pop up on message boards, nowadays you may see it on someone's iceberg chart. But why does Oblivion have just a singular female Dremora? It's a question I think is pretty self-explanatory, but I know from experience that what I, a guy who reads changelogs for fun, find self-explanatory doesn't always line up with the norm. So first, let me ask you this. How many female Dremora do you think there are in Skyrim? Or in Morrowind? I don't need exact numbers, just ballpark it. Less or more? The answer is, of course, less. Morrowind has a total of 0 female Dremora, and so does Skyrim. It's quite simple really, as Dremora are, as a rule of thumb, not female. In Morrowind, they technically don't even have a gender either way, as they were creatures rather than humanoid NPCs. Starting from Oblivion though, they would become a bit more human-like, if only in a technical sense. If you want to see exactly what I mean, here in Morrowind's construction set, you can see the Dremora in the creatures listing, while in Oblivion you can clearly see the creatures tab even having a specific Daedra subdivision, yet the actual Dremora are put underneath all the humanoid NPCs. They, alongside the Dark Seducers and Golden Saints, are the only Daedra with this distinction. This, again, is just a technical formality though. It's because they're based on the humanoid races and like them can be altered to have different armor, weapons, hairstyles, etc. The Dremora race in Oblivion is a bit more interesting than their counterpart in Skyrim. I suppose that makes sense, seeing as they're one of the most present threats in the main questline. In Oblivion, the dark skin tone, face markings, eye color are all part of the race data itself, meaning it's shared between all of them. But there are 3 unique hairstyles available for Dremora that no other races use. In Skyrim it's mostly the same, the skin tone, eye color and face markings are also part of the race data, but in this case the default Dremora face is almost identical to the default Dark Elf male face. It could also be because I'm so used to seeing it, but the evidence doesn't lie. Oblivion's defaults are just more varied. Something that surely doesn't play in Skyrim's favor is the fact that once again we have 3 hairstyles for Dremora, but they're only technically unique. They're just the male elven hairstyles but now with added horns. Also, 2 of the 3 are identical visually. So that's real nice. Now, going back to Oblivion's construction set, you'll see that like almost every other race, the Dremora race has its NPCs split by male and female. Although the female list is remarkably short, consisting of just a single entry. One thing you might notice straight off the bat is that this entry is in fact unlike the average generic enemy, as no mention of their gender is made in the editor ID. In fact, you'll find that this editor ID actually lines up perfectly with all the other male variants to a T. At this instance, in the leveled list, there are 3 variants for melee and 3 for missile or ranged combat. Considering this NPC isn't actually placed in the world, but is only an instance present in a leveled list which also contains more random leveled lists, it's easy to see why her inclusion would be overlooked. But although it isn't guaranteed, you could potentially run into her. If you charm her in this case, she would display the I have no greeting bug. This is where the game lets us look in its cards a bit more. This bug only occurs when the affected NPC has no dialogue to pull from. Male Dremora do have a greeting in this case, which you may know.
Be quick about it, mortal!
Also, fun fact, this is a temporary dialogue apparently that just made it into the final game. But ignoring that, why doesn't the female Dremora have this dialogue? Well, I suppose the jig is up by now. The female Dremora doesn't have this dialogue due to the simple fact that no dialogue exists for female Dremora in the first place. I mean, look, basically every race has its dialogue split in 2 folders, F and M, female and male recordings. The Dremora race has only a single folder, male, because female Dremora were never meant to exist. Why is there just a single female Dremora in the game? In all likelihood due to a simple misclick, as female NPCs in Oblivion technically don't exist as a whole. Every single NPC is just default, and the default is male. Being female requires ticking this checkbox right here. And presumably whoever made this generic folder enemy accidentally clicked this box and voila, you've got a gender swapped buggy NPC. But ending it here would have been too easy, right? At some point I recalled reading something on the UESP about changes made to the game with a higher resolution texture pack. Dremora females are now fully voiced after being mute with no assigned voice files in the original version of the game. Oh? Really now? That would be pretty mind-blowing. I mean, I know for a fact that the texture pack upreses or reworks some unused textures as well, because there seemingly was no direction on that part. But still, recording voice lines for a single NPC that doesn't need him? That's pretty strange. So, of course, it gets way worse. You see how that line specifies multiple Dremora females? That made me wonder, did they tweak the leveled list to include more females? That doesn't really make sense. Why would they bother? No, nothing enemy variety based was tweaked. Instead, what they did was create a fully new female Dremora NPC called Maroon's Harbinger, for use in one of their get-rich-quick schemes. So basically, new dialogue was created for just this single NPC. Yes, the original female Dremora is still in this release too, but she can't use any of that juicy new dialogue that shouldn't exist in the first place, as she's not part of the proper new faction. Why is it that every time I discover something new from this release, it's the most terrible thing you've ever heard of? Well, I mean, at least it has that going for it. Consistency. That's exactly what the original release lacked.